Hi, and welcome to the Discovery Collective podcast. My name is Emily, this is Denis, and this is podcast number 2.
Welcome to podcast number 2. Feels like a new in our, well, it's the beginning of our journey in this podcasting, and it's quite exciting, isn't it?
Yeah. How are you feeling after last time?
Yeah, I thought it was really good. You've got a new microphone now, so I'm really glad that's
Yeah.
happened. I think
We are up leveling the podcast game over here.
Yeah. Now we're raising the bar as we go. But no, I really enjoy it because I spend a lot of time listening to other people podcasting, and I think it's I think this whole long form media is really heading into how I like to receive information instead of having a 3-minute conversation on a certain topic. I feel we missed the point.
And I think, from the psychologist perspective of me, everything is about connection. As human beings, we're wired for connection. We're looking for intimacy. We're looking for having those genuine, authentic feelings of being connected to other humans. And I think podcasts do that beautifully. You could just hear someone for the first time kind of prattle on about whatever for 45 minutes. And then suddenly you're feeling that sense of like, oh, I just had that moment of connection with that person. They just spoke in my car on my way to the office or wherever. And it's driven that kind of oxytocin experience of feeling connected, which is lovely.
And I think that's what, in a time where that connection's been, I guess, void because of the pandemic and people being, because of the conditions based from that, it's really brought a lot of people in and joined a lot of people as well. So I think it's and I think there's 1 million podcasters out there at the moment. So we're one in a million.
We're 1 in a million,
which is exciting.
I love it. And it's an honor too, I think, to have people's attention. Everyone's after attention, and it's lovely to have you joining us and listening to us talk about things that matter. Rarely do we sit down and just talk about the human condition, or do we talk about these big topics around growth and transformation and well-being, and yet they're literally essential to the lifeblood of who we are as human beings, and especially human beings that are seeking experiences in life, who are seeking to get more out of whatever it is they're doing. It's so important that we have these conversations.
So on the topic of transformation and change, when we look, we often talked about the concept of need or desire. So if you look at a scale of 1 to 100, and overwhelmingly, I would assume that the need and the necessity for change would be greater than the individuals that are changing based on desire. Why is that?
It's true though, isn't it? Even as you say that, I'm thinking not only kind of like scientifically, but I'm thinking also just anecdotally. Like if you think about your life and you think about the people that you have witnessed change, especially big changes, so often that is driven by either necessity or the drive to get rid of some kind of discomfort or suffering. And, human beings, we're absolutely wired for growth and transformation and evolution. But at the same time, we're kind of wired for comfort and familiarity at the same time. And sometimes
is that drive though? It's like, my experience as we get older, you seek comfort, you seek a safe place,
Yeah. And I think that's why we've got these two things. We kind of got these two competing agendas at times. We're looking for that safety and that comfort, and that comes from familiarity. But then we're also seeking growth and transformation. And we see this in the world at the moment. There's so many entrepreneurs. I mean, people making their own podcasts, for example, or they're stuck in lockdown and now they're making sourdough or whatever it is they're doing, whether it's at a small scale or a big scale. We are seeking to learn and grow and evolve. And that is part of the tapestry of who we are as a human being. And so we've got these kind of competing agendas at times, and it can create this push-pull experience. It's like part of us wants to grow and evolve, and part of us wants to stay safe and content in that little familiar bubble that we're in.
And as you said earlier, it's a natural process. In nature, everything changes. We have our seasons change, we grow, we develop. But what is it about change that invokes so much fear in people, so much discomfort, so much, conflict?
And what's really interesting is even when we want the change, even when we're driven by a desire for change, like we're signing ourselves up for it, we still have that fear. You know, it's like people that bought their first house and it's like their dream house and they're really excited about it and they're driven by this desire to want to move into this new house. They're still racked by all of this fear and uncertainty at the same time because, you know, that really primal part of the brain that's helping keep us safe in the world is immediately coding anything that's unfamiliar as unsafe. And so we'll get that experience of nervousness or hesitation or resistance, even if for the most part we want the change.
Even if it's the right decision.
Yeah. Even if we know it's the right decision. So then think about if we don't know it's the right decision, think about if we're not convinced that it's the right decision, how much fear and hesitation we're going to bring into that experience.
And that's when we start creating our own narrative around the catastrophe, around the change, and everything
Yeah.
was fine before. And, you
Right.
create these ideas because, I think there is discomfort in transformation.
Mm.
There's courage required. There's often it is formed by a need. But myself, who has, probably undergone a lot of change in most of my journey, I got kind of used to it. I got kind of addicted
Yeah.
to it. If I wasn't changing, if I wasn't being challenged, if I wasn't afraid, then I'd fall in that status quo, which I was so afraid of when I was younger. And even,
Right.
at this stage in my life, I still fear just being too comfortable. And
Yeah.
am I developing? Am I getting better? Am I growing?
But then your comfort zone might be novelty seeking and change.
Mm,
But that's also my comfort zone. So I feel most at home when things are changing and evolving. That's what feels safe to me. So my comfort zone sometimes is to not change and evolve. My comfort zone,
yes.
breaking out of my comfort zone is sometimes challenging myself to be okay, to
Yes.
not have to always seek the next thing, to just sit and be for a little while. And so everyone has, I guess, a different relationship with change. And it's really about examining what that relationship to change is for you as an individual.
Mm. And is there a time in someone's life, like when you say, it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks, or
Yeah.
you're really
Uh-huh.
young? My kids are very routine-based children. Like they didn't like change. They didn't like. Um,
Interesting.
so
Yeah.
I guess, is there a time in someone's life where change, where is there a transition where the fear of change becomes greater?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think what you've pointed out with your kids is often there's obviously nuance in all individuals, and I think there's a personality trait in terms of novelty seeking, and so I think some people are more just their temperament is more geared toward novelty seeking, where some people are geared less toward novelty seeking, despite what age they are. I mean, look, adolescence and young adulthood is literally the point of that whole period of life is for expansion. We're looking for identity formation. We're looking where I fit in the world, what do I like? And that necessitates that we change. So we see young people generally, not always, but generally more open to change and new experiences. And then I think the other thing that we can also be certain of is when someone goes through a really significant life event, no matter how old they are, that often catalyzes something in them. And this is true not only for individuals, but for organizations. We saw this in COVID for organizations, huge, big event for an organization. And that literally catalyzed new ways of thinking, doing, and being for leaders and CEOs and entrepreneurs. And we think about it at the individual level as well. There's been a death in the family or an illness or some big catastrophic life event, and suddenly we're forced into taking a new perspective.
And I think that's what you just said. Then it's really powerful because I guess this pandemic has really forced a lot of companies outside their comfort zone. It really forced a lot of people to, I guess, to respond. So we talk a lot about adapting and reacting, and
Yes.
and our ability to adapt to new conditions often is driven by, I guess, a need to survive as a species. For example, if you go into winter or summer, there's different requirements for dietary
Yeah.
back in our, when we're cave people, and what we've come across. But as an organization or as a collective, and as an individual, there's quite a big difference between transforming an individual than transforming a collective or a group or a team or an organization,
Huge.
or a community, or
Yeah.
globally we've gone through this.
Mhm.
But the people that have adapted or responded as opposed to reacted seem to probably have done better.
I think, look, there's a time for reacting. So when we talk about that responding versus reacting, we're wired to react, and there is absolutely a time to react. Like if there is an imminent threat or danger,
Yes. Yep.
we want to be sure and trust that we're going to react in a split second. We've had a chat previously about the Tour de France and everything that's going on in terms of all of the crashes and the drama that's going on in that huge bike race at the moment. And we're seeing a lot of reacting, and that's the
Yes.
humans like biological need to stay safe. But then if we live like that, that's where we start to get into trouble. If we see everything as an imminent threat, if we see everything as an invitation for fear-based reacting, that's where we get really stuck, both at the level of the individual, but also at the level of the collective, because you can get a culture of fear and a culture of reacting within an organization as well.
And it takes a lot of energy to react, doesn't it? Like when you look at, we talked about earlier about the Tour de France. When someone is responding, they're adapting to the conditions. They're preparing themselves for the next sprint or the next burst, and then all of a sudden, someone sticks out a sign. And
Right.
again, that disruption that we talk
Uh-huh.
about now. Like with technology as it is now, and as we grow, I just did my directorship course last week, and there's a lot of talk about disruption, and a company's ability to make a decisive decision, because so many people don't make decisive decisions. We just kind of try to weigh everything up, and sometimes it comes at a massive cost. So how
Huge.
quickly can we react
Mm-hmm.
to respond and then to adapt according to the conditions? And in an organization that has an ability to um, to adapt, or has the mindset, or the capability to be able to change course, um, based off a need or requirement to survive. I'm fascinated by that, because often we do it because we have to, but then what comes out of that? That need, if it comes the desire, how do we transform that? Like basically, what I'm trying to say is, how do we transform that need into a desire to want to change?
And that's what we have to do. And I think if we don't do that, that's where we become kind of fear driven. So something might start out as a need. For example, we go into lockdown and you need to work from home.
Yep.
Okay. So that's change that's come out of a need. But then if you start to transform that into a desire, you start to go, well, maybe does working at home actually better suit the values of our company? How does it help us pursue our vision? Does it help us move forward with intention? We need to think about shifting that initial fear-based reaction into something that's more purposeful and more intentional and more aligned with where we want to go and who we want to be. Right. And so we think about, like, it's the same for the person who's gone to the doctor and they've said, if you don't change your lifestyle, you're going to die in 2 years.
Mm.
Initially, that push to change is coming from a need, but
Yes.
eventually we usually see that transform into a desire for health.
Yes.
But it usually, that initial catalyst comes as a need or a fear-based reaction.
And how do we avoid those big life-making decisions? How do we?
Huh.
We often wait, don't we? Because it's the
Wait,
discomfort for
totally.
change, it's the resistance towards change, it's the energy, and it's the fear of change that often propels us. And we know deep down, intuitively,
Yeah.
that we should be changing our lifestyle, but we often have to wait for that big decision, or someone else having to tell us, because we often don't trust ourselves.
And I see this in organizations as well. It's kind of like waiting for the harassment claim or the bullying
Mm.
claim, waiting until the team is really toxic or
Yeah.
something like that in order to move forward. And I think this is because we're not aware. A lot of us at the level of the individual, but also at the collective level, don't necessarily have that skill of self-awareness and being able to assess the situation for what it is. We're so busy kind of getting involved in the narrative and the commentary in our own head, or we're so busy getting up involved in an emotional response that we lose sight of moving in a more responsive way. We're not able to sit in that wise self consistently. We're just getting pulled out of that wise self all the time. And, we're trying to please other people, or we're trying to avoid failure rather than being able to be centered and making a wise decision from that place.
And I think we spoke earlier about going into that wise place. You kind of need to know why. I think we talked about purpose. We talked about
Yeah.
intention the other day. And when you talk about the purpose of the decision and why are we doing it, I think that's really, really, really important, especially when it comes on a collective change. You know, if we know that conditions are changing, or as an organization will fare better if we go to this other direction. The reason why we're doing it, because it's the fear again of having to change, and we got to change business systems, and we got to do all these other bits and pieces. And I was having a conversation this morning with one of my clients, and it's the end of financial year today, so it's kind of the New Year's Eve of the business year. And I had 5 questions, and I asked them all the leaders, you know, what are you proud of? Looking back in the last year, what are you proud of? You know, is there anything that you're actually proud of? What did you learn in 2021? And moving forward, is there anything that you're going to do differently based off those learnings? What are your main areas of focus? And what are you going to leave behind, or what are you going to take with you individually and personally? And it was really, really interesting. I said the majority of the leaders, basically everyone, basically said the thing that they've learned the most
Mhm.
is the cost of taking too long to make these decisions. So it's being more
Right.
decisive. It's
Yeah.
making these big decisions and not waiting on them as long as they have, because again, they're weighing up, and a few of them are very
Huh.
costly. And it was really, really interesting to hear that, and giving them that opportunity to reflect, and watching them process it is really good.
And that's the key, is if we need to give people and leaders and organizations time to pause.
Mm.
And if you give them that moment to pause, then they check in with that kind of wise part of themselves, and then they answer and respond. And so they think, this is what I'm most proud of. This is what I want to change. But if we don't create those moments of pause, if we're constantly caught in this trap and this cycle of just doing in automatic ways, then we don't have an opportunity to decide wisely. And then we get stuck in inaction. And I think this is what you're referring to here, you know, with these people, is they get stuck in this, what do I do? I'm weighing up all of these decisions. It's kind of like I'm caught in this quicksand. And the more I try and struggle and figure out what to do, the deeper I get into the quicksand. Whereas if I had have made that snap decision at the beginning, I wouldn't have been dragged down into that place.
Well, the cost of the decision sometimes, sometimes the message of not making a decision is greater than making the decision. And often there are difficult decisions that needed to be made. They
Yeah.
just delayed them. And I think that's something that, you know, even on this director's course, you know, I was asked a question, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your risk appetite towards, if you're on holidays, would you go bungee jumping, or would you be sitting by the pool drinking cocktails? And
Let me guess. Cocktail. No, I'm just joking.
well, both. I like the cocktails and I like the bungee jumping. And I said, 8 or 9. He goes, is it 8 or 9? Be decisive. You're a director. And he actually slammed me. And I was like, oh, wow.
Wow.
And I thought that was really powerful. But it is that. It's being able to make a decision and back that decision. And it's
You know that,
backing the decision that's the hardest bit. It's like, I don't know. What does Emily want? What do you guys want?
yeah, interesting.
It's basically make a decision, then discuss it. Discuss why, because we fall into this whole societal, society bias. We look at, we're
Mhm.
managing expectations of others. We're often in a position, and with business, a lot of large organizations, they've got shareholders, they've got boards
Yeah,
of directors, they've got all
yeah.
these people that they're answerable to, they're being measured by. And often our reactions and our decisions will be made based off the fear of not achieving, or not meeting our,
Mhm.
our expected KPIs, or whatever you want to call it. And a big part of this course, which is, I've always known, but they've touched on culture, on every element, on the legal, the governance, the risk, the
Yeah,
strategy, even a financial. What is the culture of the organization? And whether, if you've got a healthy culture, people will report. People will often
exactly.
do the right thing
Mhm.
for the common good. But if it's fear-based, if it's one of these power over organizations, people will be very, very less reluctant to stick their head out and make those decisions, and they'll let other people make it at the cost of their own well-being.
And all decisions are relational decisions. So what
Mm,
I mean by that is,
yes,
we're relational beings, as in
correct.
we're here to form relationships with other people, professional, personal, whatever. And we're making decisions based on those relationships. And because our biggest fear, right, is that fear of rejection, fear of
Correct.
abandonment, fear of,
Correct.
not belonging to the tribe, whether that tribe is your stakeholders, or whether it's your team, or whether it's your peers or your colleagues or whoever that is. And so if we're making decisions based on, I don't want to be rejected, I don't want to do the wrong thing, I don't want to not belong, then we're not necessarily making decisions based on our wisdom, our expertise and intuition, and our values.
Yeah.
We're just reacting to whatever decision we think is going to make us belong to whatever tribe we're worried about in that moment.
And being seen and heard, and being afraid of the consequence of making a bad decision. And I think when we talk about the pressure of making these decisions or being put on the spot, um, and that place where, how do you change that, as an individual who was caught in that pleasing world for so long, and to be able to be that decisive individual and make decisions based off you know the best,
Mm-hmm.
the information I have at the time, but trusting your intuition is so hard, because
Yeah.
we spend so much time in our head. Our heart and our
Mhm.
guts, provide a lot of information, but I guess it's our gut instinct that kept us alive. Like it's the saber-toothed tigers.
Absolutely.
Feels like the living on the savannah. You've got the lions and all these things trying to eat us. But
Uh-huh.
nowadays we're still wired the same way, but we don't have the same threats or the same consequences, I guess.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think, how do we get out of that? It's a good
Mm.
question. It's like, how do we start making decisions based on our intuitive expertise and our values and what we know is wise and best, versus what is going to make us liked or what is going to make us not fail.
Yeah,
Like, if what we're chasing is to not fail, then
that's
we're being driven by fear. Whereas
yep.
what if we're chasing is a higher goal or a higher vision or a higher purpose, then failure doesn't matter, because what matters is the vision and the purpose and the intention, not how many times I've failed along the way or who didn't like me. But that's an ongoing practice. We can't expect to go, oh, well, tomorrow I'm just going to totally not worry about what anyone else thinks and be totally driven by my own intuition. We need to feel safe in our relationships. So if I was to sort of give, I don't know, generalized advice around that, if we feel safe in our relationships and we feel like we are going to be supported no matter what by the people who matter, we're more likely to take risks,
Yes.
because we're not at the love, whether that is, and I use love in a very broad term, but whether or not that is the regard from our colleagues and shareholders or our family or whoever, if we know that we're cared for and supported no matter what, we're more likely to take those bold risks. And we see that in children, we see that in adults,
Mm.
we see that in professional sports as well as business. So I think that's really important. If we feel we don't have that in our life and our relationships are tenuous and we're not going to be supported if we fail, then we will be fear driven.
Yep. Well, that comes back to safety, right? So if you don't
Absolutely.
feel safe, if you don't, but then um, it's that courageous move where, today I'm going to, just one of these leaders, I honored her today on the fact that she's just been on this incredible transformation.
Uh-huh.
And when I asked her about, what are you proud of this year? And she said, stepping up, and not,
Yeah.
not being driven by what goes wrong, what happens, what could potentially go wrong with my decision, and
Right.
changing that mindset to what could go right. What's the benefit of me just going, okay, this is what I feel is
Yeah.
the best decision. And then taking that as an opportunity to learn, not as a failure, as, oh, I failed again. It's that, how we see failure, how that relationship we have with,
Mm-hmm.
um, with the willingness to take a knock,
Yeah.
but um, not be so focused on the potential consequence of that bad decision.
But if we can believe in our ability to bounce back, so
Yes.
if we can
Yep.
believe in our own resilience, and if we can be sure that there will be people to catch us, we are more likely to step up.
But that
You know?
there is it, though, right? It's having that, because if you're not in a safe place, if you're
Mm-hmm.
working in an environment, or you're surrounded by a group of people who are not supportive, who will just jump on you for every, again, that's going to have a massive impact on your ability to
Huge.
actually take those risks, and be willing enough to make that transformational journey for yourself. So again, a lot of it would have to be, in your surroundings, but at the same time within yourself. So how do we come out of
Absolutely.
that?
And
How do
believe
we?
in your own resilience.
Hmm.
And I think the only way you're going to believe in your resilience is to test it.
Yep.
It's not we can't theoretically believe in our
No.
resilience. Like I can't go and imagine myself taking risks and imagine myself bouncing back, and that's good enough. I need to actually test that. I need the evidence from my own life experience. And that's why attempting things is so important, because if we don't have that bank of evidence that says I've done this 50 times and I know no matter what happens I'll be okay, then we can't trust in that next time. We need to
I think,
constantly be giving ourselves opportunity to get evidence that no matter what happens in life, we're going to be okay.
and start making little decisions and like, oh, I'm going to make this for dinner tonight, maybe, as opposed to
Yeah,
going,
totally.
I'm going to change my whole company's direction this week.
Start small. Start small, and so that the body can get used to the experience of going out on a limb. We need to start small with that and build up that ability and that confidence that we have in ourselves.
And then you start getting that muscle memory, and then you start getting comfortable with small steps and changes. And coming from someone who's used to had no other option but to adapt. When we started Vertec, the week I quit my job as a behavioral safety coach, which was quite a well-paid job, and out of potentially really good future ahead of me, we quit. I started Vertec with my mate Andy, and that week the global financial crisis hit. And we just went, whoa, what are we, in the fear, I just felt this, I felt choked. We had very young kids, we're mortgaged. We didn't have, financial backing in any way, shape or form. So we immediately went into a completely different direction as an organization to capture a market that legally needed to be compliant with. So we immediately went into this whole other area, which was an area that we were very reluctant in going into, but it just forced us to have to do it. And we had to do it well in order to survive. And I think it was that fear of, not so much the fear of failure, but the fear of losing everything. That's amazing how that propels you to do things and
Totally.
and to walk outside your comfort zone and at all costs to make it happen. And that, for me, that was a really big testing point for us.
But my sense is that soon turned into a desire, that need
Yes.
you had at the
Absolutely.
beginning
Over time
turned into a desire to want to build a company that was different, that was committed to its people and its safety and its culture, etc.
And I guess that set the foundation of the organization from the onset. And
Right.
and we did say that our goal was to build something that was designed around people, for people, but at the same token, because we had to adapt very, very early into the piece, unexpectedly, I think that became our strong point. I think, that's really interesting because, I as yourself, you work on an individual basis, and I work on a collective and team basis. And what we're doing with the Discovery Collective is heading more into that collective space of transformation and organizational well-being and growth and performance. And is there a big difference in terms of transformation on the individual basis?
Huge. So I'm now, what's really interesting is, like the pivot in my career over the last year has been from the micro, person to person, now to the macro. So now I'm really, all of my work is focused on things that are occurring at least a national level. And so it's different when we're looking at, individual change versus collective change. Because the individual, where all we have is our own experience. That's all we need to manage and think through. On the collective, we've got all of these different experiences, all of these different organisms that we need to think about. How do we rally them toward change? And to me, the key here is there needs to be shared vision, shared values, shared intention for moving forward, and opportunities to come and connect and find common reasons for change and transformation.
And also balanced by the consequence of not changing.
Yeah,
Not the fear of
absolutely.
it, but the consequence of, as an organization or as a team, as a sporting team, for example, all these other
Yeah.
elements. Like, what's the consequence for us not changing?
And we need to ask ourselves that. We need to say, so if in 5 years I didn't change anything and I just kept going like I am, what would the consequences be for
Mhm.
me as an individual, for me as a collective? What is going to be the impact of me not changing? And that's a hugely important question to ask, because we're so used to asking the question, what's going to be the impact of changing
Yeah.
versus what's going to be the impact of not changing.
And it's often, and it's the transformation, it's the process itself, which I find the reward comes from. It's yeah, the
Absolutely.
outcome's great, but it's the learnings that you've taken. It's the process of transforming. It's the journey itself, because it's at the beginning. It's, oh my, okay, there's a need. We have to. How are we going to do this? Then you've got to appease all the fears, and
Mm-hmm.
and I keep coming back to why. Why are we doing it? What is the vision? What are we trying to achieve? What is it that we, as an organization or as an individual, what is it that we're trying to get out of this? And then breaking down a plan, a bit of a strategy. Then it's the process of letting go. So one of the questions, again, is like any sporting team at the end of a season, what
Yeah.
are we leaving behind? What are we taking with us? And what are we going to adapt or change or amend within us that we will still take with us, that still serves us? And it's really asking that question. Is this serving us? Is it not serving? Is it because we've always done it? And I say that all the time. The 6 most expensive words in business is, we've always done it that way. And
Yeah.
it's necessarily well, is it because is it the best way to do it? And if it is, fantastic. Then if it isn't,
Mm-hmm.
make those changes, because the cost of not changing, and all these little incremental elements as well. And there's one out this I read this concept of if you've got 10 processes within your organization or your home life, if you change them all by 1%, you're introducing almost a 10% change in the
Totally.
long run. And it allows you to start looking at things a little bit differently. And if you're actually, if you, and you can get addicted for changing for the sake of changing. If we're not changing, we're not moving, that can be a bit as detrimental as not changing.
Yeah. And I think this is where the intention is so
Mm,
vital.
yeah.
And that's the common thing here is, are we moving forward with intention? Are we staying still with intention?
Mhm.
Everything we do, we need to do with intention. And I think for a collective needs to both harbor the collective goal as well as the individual goal and need. So it's like working at two layers.
Yes.
Because I think and I've seen this with organizations, it's all about the collective goal with no regard for the individual goals or needs. Or sometimes it's too focused on individual goals and needs, and that loses the collective goals and needs. And so we need to find this balance. And this is where leadership comes in. We
Yes.
need to create a container. So organizations kind of like a container that is big enough to hold the collective vision and respond to the collective needs, but also satisfy the individual vision within that and the individual needs within that.
And getting people on board to share that intention. I think the word intention really, that's just
Mm-hmm.
struck a chord in me when you said that. And it's knowing why we're changing, but where we're going, but why are we doing it? And having that intention as a shared goal, as a collective, is phenomenal. Because if you're not on board, people feel it, they see it, and you'll feel it yourself.
Yeah.
And why are we doing it? Is it to appease others, or is it because it's going to benefit me as an individual and as an organization? So what I've often done is I've broken it down to the lowest denominator, to how are
Yeah.
how are we going to benefit as an organization? But if we're not all on board with this journey of change, and if we're not embodying it, if we're not living it ourselves and not really genuinely believing in it, it's not going to work. Or you're going to get left behind,
Mm-hmm.
and you might feel that sense of rejection or not being, as we
Yeah.
talked about before, our biggest fear is rejection. Our biggest need is belonging. So having people on board, but it's really important right from the onset is communicating that the purpose of it, but really is getting everybody on board. And that's just where a lot of, like we talked about that reflection period earlier, and getting people to stop to think about,
Mm-hmm.
um, okay, why are we doing this? And breaking it down so we're all kind of understanding, and maybe having the opportunity to voice our fears and our reluctance, and or what are the benefits, and really knowing
Yes.
what are the costs, what is the, and really taking that time. But very few people do that.
And this, I think you've hit the nail on the head here. And that is that, yes, we need a collective vision. Yes, we need to be on board with that collective vision, but we need to allow diversity and dissent within that.
Mm.
Because what we're asking is for total homogeneity, like if we're asking, we need a totally homogenous workforce that all think the same, believe the same, have the same motivation at all points in time. We're not only asking for something that's not achievable, but then we're moving towards something like groupthink, where we have absolutely
Yes.
not the right recipe for growth and transformation. So we need both the enough similarity and commonality to move forward, but also enough diversity and dissent to
Yes.
be able to challenge those ideas and move in the direction of growth. And so the biggest asset of the collective is its diversity, and
Yes.
the biggest threat to the collective is its diversity. So it's a really interesting place to be at, and we need to know how to harness diversity for the common good, rather than have diversity become a point of division and isolation. And I think we're seeing this on a global scale
Oh,
at the moment.
it's
I
massive.
mean, this is what we can either celebrate diversity and make space for it, and at the same time come together for something common, or we can use diversity as a way to become isolated from one another.
Mm. And one of the questions I asked another organization the other day is, what's your role? What role will you play
Yeah,
in the change, this collective change that we're heading on board? And everyone's going to have a different role to play. And asking myself, what role, what role do
absolutely.
I have to play as a leader here? And it's to create influence within my team, and get
Mm-hmm.
them to understand the reason why we are going through this transformation, or the reason why we're going to sit still right now, or the reason,
Yes.
again, is having that reflection time and having people, and I guess communicating that through the organization. And the larger the organization, the more difficult it is. And I've
Sure.
experienced that,
Yeah.
but we all have a role to play, every single one of us, um, within this change, or within this development, or within this journey. But it's understanding that, and knowing that, your power of influence, despite what you do, has um, has impact.
And we need to celebrate everyone's role and contribution, and
Mm.
we need to also celebrate our own role and contribution. And I think if we know how individually we're contributing to a common goal, and we can celebrate that contribution that we're making, and we feel celebrated by other people, then we have that winning formula.
Yes.
But if everyone's just expected to just keep on working toward the boss's vision and not be celebrated and not be seen and not be recognized, then you will get dissent and you'll get division and you will get protesters within the organization
You've
instead of partners and collaborators.
you've just described the recipe for good intention, and the recipe for lack of intention, right?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's really powerful. And I think having that ability for people to, I guess, acknowledge, um, you know, the reason at whether at the top or bottom, however your organization is built, or as an individual, like,
Mm.
what is my, why do I have to, like, okay, I need to change, and then converting that need into a desire, into the journey of, okay, I'm changing. My doctor told me I need to do this, or I know deep down, do I need someone to come and tell me? Intuitively we know, but again, it would just at that resistance. So again, it's acknowledging that, taking that courage,
Mm-hmm.
and being a bit brave, and going, you know what, I know deep down that I need to make this change. And often it's just that thought, that process, that acceptance that starts the process.
And I would almost argue at a really kind of big picture perspective is that we're not really choosing change in the way that we think. Like, the world has got undercurrents of energy and change that are beyond our control anyway, right? And if we're quiet enough to listen, we will pick up on what those currents of change are, and then we just need to ride with them.
Yes, yes, yes.
But I think
It's trusting
we
that, right? It's being able to
yes.
trust. It's the ride. Yes, I like that.
If we it's like so if we think about change in terms of an analogy, is imagine that you were body surfing, right? So you're out in the ocean, it's summer, it's hot, you're body surfing and there's all these perfect waves there for you to catch. But you've got to wait, right? You've got to wait for that perfect
moment.
wave and that perfect moment on that perfect wave. And then you've got to position yourself
Yes.
and you've got to do
Hit
everything
at the
on
right
your
time.
behalf.
Yes.
And then you just need to let go.
Yeah, and
And
then ride it. But again, it's, and in being Canadian, so moving to Australia and learning how to body surf and learning to play with the ocean, I learned the hard way because I got
right,
smashed. and,
right.
and it's that, and again, but is that fear of getting smashed and getting it wrong in front of a whole bunch of people greater than my willingness to go, I can do this, I can do this,
Yeah.
I can do this. Again, it's
And I
putting
think
yourself
that
outside that comfort
evolution
zone.
is, it's like learning how to body surf. It's
Yep.
learning, where do I need to position myself? How can
Yes.
I learn to read my surroundings? And how can I pick up on when there is a potential current of change that I want to ride? And then how can I just let go? And I feel like the letting go part is the one where people really struggle, because it's at that letting go part
Yes.
where they think
Totally.
they
Because
want to
that's where the
hold on
consequences at its
and
highest.
control, and that's where we need to have that perfect blend of, I'm going to do everything on my control that I can, and then I'm also going to surrender at the same time.
And surrendering is it is probably the most difficult thing. It's having that trust in self, trusting the ocean, accepting what is, and then flowing through it. I heard a really great quote the other day. Well, I heard this years ago, but when people say, "Oh, that person's really lucky," or they're very, either you're lucky with your business, and yeah, we're fortunate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, fortune favors the brave, but there's a really great quote where this golfer hit this shot, it was a really difficult shot. And someone said, lucky shot. And he goes, yeah, it's amazing. The more I practice, the luckier I get. And,
Yeah.
and it's really, it's having that ability to work towards something. It doesn't
Yeah.
happen easy. And in transformation certainly doesn't happen easy. Big transformation it doesn't happen. And I guess that's the reward for the effort, isn't it?
And if we don't learn to read our surroundings, if we don't learn to look for those opportunities and to wisely seize those opportunities, then we won't be lucky. Our luck comes from our ability to read the situation and be able to just ride with those currents of energy towards that next goal, towards that next level.
And I guess the more you do, the more the lucky you get. And I still don't. I'm more of a fortune person. Luck is you win lotto,
Yeah.
or you get hit by a piano
Right.
walking down the street. Good luck, bad luck. It's just part of life.
Life.
But I think I still love that. Fortune favors the brave. And if you do put yourself out there, more often than not, things will generally fall your way.
And so we think this conversation, right, shows us just how complex and nuanced the process of transformation and evolution is. We're never going to be a master of this, even though we're designed as human beings for evolution. We're never going to get to a point in our life where we've totally nailed that process of transformation. There is so much to learn, and it's such a nuanced experience. But hopefully, I guess what we're doing is opening up your eyes to just exactly what that process involves and how you can position yourself to ride those opportunities, and to seize the fortune that's in front of you.
And if there's one thing that is constant in life, it is change.
It is change. So figure out what relationship you want to have with it, because you can be sure it's happening, and it will happen again.
And it'll happen again and again. And it's how we adapt and respond or react.
What a lovely thing it is to sit and converse, and I
I love
think
it.
to myself, what a lovely thing it is for ideas to be able to be spread across the world in this way. So thank you so much for your attention, and your time. Such a valuable resource. And hopefully, as we were having a conversation together, you were having a conversation in your own head about how this applies to you and your life. Because that conversation that's going on in your own head as we talk, that's the important one. So hopefully there was something in that helped you.
Yeah. And for me, I would just say back yourself after, speaking to these leaders this morning. It's
Uh-huh.
that ability to make a decision, and that's that ability to be able to call it and follow it through. And whether you're successful or not, again, it's just another opportunity to learn, but back yourself and have that courage. You have it within yourself. And I think we all do. And sometimes we've just lost that relationship with it. And I think it's really, really important to just have that crack. And
Yeah.
and what's the cost of not changing versus the cost of changing?
Yeah.
Reflect on that.
Consider this your reminder,
Yeah.
reminder to touch back into that wise part of you that knows how to back yourself. And thank you very much. And we're going
Thanks,
to be
Emily.
seeing you for podcast number 3 next
Yeah.
time.
Okay. Hopefully in 2 weeks. We'll try to do this every couple of weeks if we can.
Perfect.
All right.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Have a great one.